Hey, friends. Dami, we wanted to let you know it looks like your microphone is still muted right now. So,
Oh,
can I?
thank you, Alec.
Absolutely. I'll send it back your way for that intro. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm sure I said some great things. Thank you, Alec. So again, I'm sorry about that. My name is Dami Waldron, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at Westtown. Before we begin, let's take another moment of shared worship, although we sat in silence for a long time. So let's just pause for a couple seconds. Thank you. If you didn't catch the intro song, that was Thank You Next by Ariana Grande, which was featured in the first episode of Bridgerton and played by a string quartet. We are very excited tonight to host a very special guest, Leila Cohan, which is one of the writers for Bridgerton. She is also a writer for BET's Plus First Wives Club and a co-producer on the Emmy-nominated Netflix comedy special. I met Leila through networking for our alma mater, Smith College, and we connected on Facebook, and I asked her to do this event. And although she isn't a Westonian, she's an honorary member tonight. This is a webinar style event, so feel free to engage in the chat, share your kudos, or ask Leila questions. We will be giving away 2 Netflix swag bags, as you can see behind me tonight, so feel free to engage, and that way Leila can pick your name as one of our winners. I'm now going to turn it over to our host, Alex Ates, Westtown's Director of Theater. Thank you, Alex, and thank you for letting me know I was on mute that whole time.
Absolutely, Dami. Thanks for that introduction. Hi, friends. My name is Alex Ates. As Dami mentioned, I'm the Director of Theater at Westtown, and I'm so happy to be sharing this evening with you all. So before I got to Westtown, I was actually a writer and reporter for Backstage Magazine, where I covered entertainment news. And so I am thrilled about this evening to sort of jump back into that role by interviewing our special guest tonight, Leila Cohan. So let me tell you a little bit more about Leila. Leila is a television and feature writer, and most recently, she was co-executive producer on season 2 of the Emmy-nominated Netflix comedy special. She's written for Bridgerton, as we've all certainly gotten the vibe of, the First Wives Club, Santa Clarita Diet, Telenovela, and Awkward. She's developed pilots for the CW, YouTube Red, and ABC Family. Her original feature, IRL, a romantic comedy about a woman who accidentally wishes away the internet, is currently in development with Picture Start, and Leila is currently developing projects with Paramount Television and Hello Sunshine. It is our privilege and honor to welcome Leila Cohan to the Westtown community. Leila, how are you? Oh, Leila, you're mute. There it is.
Am I muted now?
You are perfect.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Welcome to my kitchen.
It looks lovely.
Thank you.
I'm backstage at Westtown, and you know, it's one of these lights that will go out if I don't move around. So right. I'll try to gesticulate in the way of the sensor here. So Leila, really quickly, where are you in the world right now, and how are you? These are tough times. How are you, and how's your family?
You know, I'm doing okay. I'm in Long Beach, California. I moved, so I'm still in LA County, but not quite in the middle of the city. I moved out here because everything's virtual right now. So yeah. I figured might as well live 8 minutes from the beach. So it's very good. You know, we're holding up, ready to start getting back to normal, but we've been holding up okay.
Good. I'm so happy to hear that. So let's jump right in. I have so many questions, and the first is, I think like a writer of stories, to be able to imagine the characters and the world, that's a superpower. But the other sort of like added superpower that I think you have is that you're also a comedy writer. And being able to craft jokes in addition to make worlds is such a remarkable gift. When did you realize that you had that gift?
Well, it's so funny because I grew up, truly, I wrote a play and made my mom let me perform it when I was 4 years old at her birthday party. Her birthday party, not mine, by the way. I was like, hi, I'm the entertainment here. And then in high school, I would write like little, like what I now realize are like comedy sketches for my friends. And I never really put it together. Like it didn't feel, I knew I was funny, but writing as a career didn't feel like something that like people like me did. You know, I grew up in Boston, I went to public schools, like it just didn't seem like quite the milieu, I guess. And that sounded very pretentious. But I went to a performing arts high school, studied theater actually, and realized when I got there I did not have it in me to be an actor. And so I sort of went the hard other direction for college, went to Smith, like Donnie, and had majored in government, applied to law school, and then woke up one night senior year of college, was just like, I'm not going to be happy unless I do something in the arts. So I moved to New York, sort of floundered around for a little while. I was a food blogger, I was a nanny, I was an agency assistant. And then I remembered that in high school, what I had really loved doing in theater was improv. So I went to a improv show at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. And I was like, oh, this is so fun. I should take a class. So I took an improv class. I took a couple and I liked it. And then I took a sketch writing class. And I was like, oh, ding, ding, ding. This is it. This is what I want to be doing. And I think I realized fairly quickly once I got in that environment that it was something I thrived in, that I could, write jokes quickly and come up with something funny. And that I also, through that experience, really learned the discipline to sit down and write every day. Because I was on a couple of the sketch teams at the theater. I had to bring in new sketches every week. And I was also working a full-time non-comedy writing job. So I think that really gave me the discipline to sit down and just get my reps in.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, UCB, or the Upright Citizens Brigade, is maybe one of the most important training grounds for actors and writers. What was it like at UCB? And, being in that sort of environment is a great place to cut your teeth. Can you tell us some stories about some of the sketches that you wrote and what it was like, being on some of the sketch teams there?
Totally. It's so funny because I really found it to be an incredibly supportive environment for the most part. So we were all kind of coming up together. And I think the thing I didn't appreciate while I was there was that I would never have quite that much freedom ever again. So I had a show run at the theater that was called This Is About Smith. That was literally about Smith, where I went to college. And it was, part of the show was just an a cappella group singing Both Hands by Ani DeFranco and crying. That was it. That was the sketch. And when you start getting paid for it, people start giving you notes. And it was, at the time I was like, oh, what's happening? Is my career really getting started? And now I'm like, oh my God, that was so much fun. I didn't appreciate it. And it has been, I was part of a really stacked generation there. Kate McKinnon was on my first sketch team. I came up with Abby and Alana from Broad City, Rachel Bloom from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Nicole Byer, who's the queen of all media. And so it was truly just such a delight to sort of see all of us grow together, from being these babies in Improv 101 to turning on my TV and seeing people. And it was just and I think I also, when I went into a professional writer's room for the first time, I already had more skills than sort of other staff writers, just because I'd been on these sketch teams. I'd learned to rewrite a sketch a million times. I've learned to take notes. I've learned to give notes. It really prepared me well for my sort of professional writing career.
Yeah. So how did that leap happen from UCB to television?
So I had a bunch of shows run at UCB. I had a web series that I co-wrote with another friend from the theater called Badge Magazine that starred Kate McKinnon and a bunch of other very funny people from the theater. And we, through all of that, I got a pretty bad manager, actually. He did not do much, but the one thing that he did do was he was basically cold calling an agent at ICM which is one of the big agencies, and saying like, hey, I have this writer, can you read her script? And I think finally the agent got so annoyed at hearing from him that he was like, fine, whatever. And it was right after, at the time, most television staffing was done over like a 6-week period. It was right after that period ended. So we had like some downtime in. And I was at a babysitting job. And I got a call from my manager that was like, hey, this guy at ICM wants to sign you. And you have a meeting for an NBC show in a half hour. And that baby did me a solid. Took a 3-hour nap that day. But I got the job off a Skype interview, which is like wild, does not usually happen, like really gave me a false sense of how easy it is to get jobs. And that was that was my first show. And that was a show called Next Caller that was canceled before it aired. So a truly wild break into the industry, but I learned a ton, and it was sort of my entree into the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, that's amazing. And like, is the lesson just like keep like persistently getting in touch with people, and sometimes it actually lines up somehow?
Yes.
Great. Clocking that. And so many like shows and pilots in a writer's life probably don't make it, you know, right? Is that the case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, you know, this is the only time I've been staffed on something that didn't air, but I've written 3 pilots. None of them have made it. I've had 2 features that have been sold that haven't been made. Like most stuff that you write that's not on staff just kind of goes into the ether and is never heard from again. So you have to develop very quickly like a very thick skin about it. And you can't get too attached to anything.
Yeah. And when you say on staff, that's versus like being a freelancer or contracted writer?
Yeah. So that's when I'm in a writer's room. So on Bridgerton or on Special, I'm part of the writer's room, and I'm there for, I think 20 weeks both times. It might have been 24 on Bridgerton. And, you know, we're all working as a staff together to sort of break the stories and figure out what's going to happen on the show, which I can talk about in more detail. But yeah, so when you're writing for a show, you have usually, although clearly not always, some promise of it actually airing. But when you're writing stuff on your own, it's really just like, all right, just gonna keep writing out here and sending it, and maybe someday someone will shoot it.
Well, it's so amazing. Like when you think about all the shows that may have not happened, and then being on staff for a cultural phenomenon of a show like Bridgerton. So how did that happen? Like, how did you get in on the Shondaland Bridgerton production?
Totally. So I had met with Shondaland a couple of times. I'd had a general with them, and then I'd had sort of a more specific general with Betsy Beers, who's kind of the number 2 there, right below Shonda. And then I pitched them something that they didn't actually want. And through all that, though, I think I was kind of on their list. And they, I think we're like, well, when there's something that feels right for her. Because I've worked mostly in half hour. Now I've done a little more hour-long stuff, but I've mostly worked in half hour. So like, you know, it would have been a little bit of a weird thing for me to do on like Scandal or How to Get Away with Murder. But I think when this came up, they were like, okay, sure. So I went and met with the showrunner, had a lovely meeting, wound up in the room, which that season 1 room was so talented, so many incredible writers. And also like really truly like friends. Like we wrapped that room, God, 2 years ago now. Wow. And still talk to them like many days. So, you know, and it was sort of a funny experience because we're adapting these books, which I don't know if folks have read. The whole Bridgerton series is very fun. But it was really fun. It was the first time I'd done that. It was really fun to sort of be like, okay, well, this is what the sort of raw material we have is, how do we translate that into an 8-episode season? How do we decide what to highlight? How do we decide what to get rid of? How do we flesh it out? I think that like if you've read the first book, it's very, very, very singularly focused on Daphne and Simon. And we knew we wanted it to be more of an ensemble piece. So it was like, okay, well, how do we do these stories for Anthony? Do we pull from later? Do we invent some stuff? Marina is like a throwaway character at the beginning of book 5, I think, that we sort of fleshed out and made a huge part of the season. So it was a super interesting challenge.
Yeah. What do you think it is about Bridgerton that is hitting such a chord right now?
I think that, for one thing, I think when it came out, the timing of it being sort of in the pandemic, right around Christmas, it's so escapist. It's so gorgeous. I mean, obviously the actors are very beautiful, but the costumes, the production, it's like lush and beautiful and feels just fantastical. And I think everyone, when it came out, was so ready for that and was so ready for this escapism and this like world where, you know, they are out and about on Bridgerton. They are going to balls. They are like at the modiste. And while we were all sitting on our couches, that seemed pretty nice. So I think that was sort of the timing. I think it would have been a success anyways. I think it, you know, stands on its own and it's got a lot going for it. But I think the timing was really like sort of the secret sauce for that to become the sort of cultural phenomenon it did. And it's crazy. I mean, it's, you know, you work on a bunch of shows, you never know what's going to hit. And Bridgerton, our production was in England, so I didn't go on set or anything. So it was, I truly had no idea how it was going to turn out. And then I saw it, I was like, oh, great.
So people were really ready for Bridgerton. Recently, people not so ready for some breaking casting news, you know, Regé-Jean Page. I imagine that's probably on the minds of some of the people watching. Leila Cohan, any comment?
I wish I knew more. I've been desperately trying to get the tea on this. From what I can tell, I really don't think there is much. I think it's, you know, he was never going to be a big part of this season. The intent was always for him and Daphne to sort of be at their country estate and like perhaps pop in once or twice. And I think, I actually don't know if we'll see Daphne, but I assume we will. But I think that, you know, it wound up being a whole thing with scheduling and stuff probably. But I sadly, very, very sadly have not met him. So I know about as much as anyone watching this does, which is that he's so handsome. Oh my God. And I've heard he's very nice.
Got it. So it's so interesting to me that like you're so involved in developing the story. And then when it goes into production, it's just a whole other thing. So you have the viewing experience that we have. Have you binged the show?
I semi-binged. I think I watched it in like 3 or 4 nights. And, you know, because I went on to special, I wasn't able to be involved with season 2, which has already been written. So I'm really looking forward to watching the future seasons as a fan. Because I think when I watched season 1, all I was able to see was like, oh my God, that took us forever to figure out that story problem. We're like, oh, does that work? Or, oh, they cut this bit and this bit's still here. That's interesting. So I like couldn't lose myself in the world as much as I would have liked to. And I'm really looking forward to subsequent seasons, like getting on my couch with some popcorn and just like, well, and I have friends who are writing on season 2 and I've been like, don't tell me, I don't want to know. So I'm looking forward very much to getting on that.
Okay, that's awesome. So like, is there a story that comes to mind? Because one thing I'm curious about is like, how does a writer's room work? And so I'm so interested about that. When you watch the show, you have this whole history of like, oh yeah, like I remember working through that scene or coming up with that line. Is there a particular moment that you think of that was sort of weird or exciting or disassociating to watch so many months after you had written it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we really sort of worked through I actually took some notes about it. We worked through, I think, 4 or 5 versions of episode 103, which is the one with my name on it. And a quirk of Sean Lynn is that everyone kind of group writes everything. So 103 has my name on it, but I worked on all the episodes and everyone worked on my episode. So, but 103 is technically mine. So I think that we worked on 5 separate breaks of that. And the things that stayed really constant were the Marina story to some extent, where she's, can I give spoilers? Am I allowed to?
Oh gosh, that is a loaded question. Maybe like coded spoilers.
Okay. So what happens with Marina and her letters was always there. Daphne's moment of self-discovery was always there. And there's a scene, this is not spoilers, this is just cute. There's a scene where Daphne and Anthony try to have a warm milk in the middle of the night, and they can't figure out how to turn on the stove. And that's from the book, and we always knew that was going to land in episode 103. But almost everything else changed dramatically between times. So it was super, super. There's so much on any show. There's so much that's left on the cutting room floor, not just even stuff that was shot, but stuff from the writer's room, stuff that we loved in the room that like just, you change one thing and it's like pulling a thread and now the thing you love doesn't work. And so now you're doing a different version of that thing. And it's very funny to like see it sort of take place live.
Yeah, there's that phrase, kill your darlings.
Yes.
Yeah.
There were many darlings tragically murdered on Bridgerton.
It's one of the, I think it's one of the things that people don't really realize often is that there's so much give and take in the process. Do you feel like when any television show makes it to production and then finally gets to some sort of streaming service, like, do you feel like it has changed in any way? Like, how do you deal with that? Like, have you had a moment where it's like, wait a minute, this is totally different from what we had, and maybe it's better, or maybe it's just different. How do you deal with that?
Yes. I think everything changes. I think it's a miracle when anything is good, basically. Like, I think that the process is such that like things should improve. They don't always. You're always feels like you're operating on a tightrope where one thing could cause the whole enterprise to sort of crumble. Whether it's like the thing that you wrote doesn't work, or an actor can't nail it, or there's just a weird costuming decision. There's so much that goes into it, and so many incredible people, putting their mark on it, from the actors to the set decks to, just the directors, like everyone. So I think things always do change, and you always do kind of have to know that. I think sometimes I'll be very sad, especially with jokes. Sometimes I'll be very sad that a joke didn't go through, but also sometimes things will make it through that shock me. When I was on Telenovela, a show I'm sure everyone here watched, a one-season NBC show, I pitched. It was a show that was behind the scenes at a telenovela, Spanish language soap opera. Mm-hmm. And we had an episode where there was a hurricane and the power went out, and I pitched truly an insane joke that was, well, fortunately we have all those torches left over from the episode where an angry mob burned down the torch factory. And I pitched it, and our writer's assistant was like, that is insane. That there's no way that goes on air. And it went on, and he bet me $10, and it went on air, and he wound up in the writer's room presenting me with a framed $10 gift certificate. Because we're just like, there's no way. And then sometimes those things, it's like, all right, sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. So like when you look at the art of the swoon,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that it's a communal writing experience, but when you see your name in the opening title credits, does that ever get old?
No, I love it. It's always fun. It's always a trip. When I was on Santa Clarita Diet, we had our premiere at the ArcLight Theater, recently RIP, in Los Angeles. But it's this huge, it's a Cinerama Dome, so it's like this huge screen. And I got to see my name on the big screen for the first time. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, even seeing it here, and actually this is dark but funny. I recently got divorced. I'm fine. But my married name appears on screen for the last time under the words, "Those who marry in haste are doomed to repent at leisure."
You know, reverse jokes, right? That just like the cosmic sense of humor.
So that episode was really a blast. And do you want me to talk about the clip?
Yeah. So, you know, the reason why I'm specifically curious about like seeing your name is because you're going to have that experience again in a moment, because we have a clip from The Art of the Swoon. So could you sort of set up the clip a little bit that we're going to check out?
So this is from the third episode, and Daphne and Simon, you'll figure out who they are very quickly, have been participating in a ruse where they are pretending they are madly in love. It's during, the social marriage season of 1813, and Daphne, through various reasons in the pilot, did not have enough suitors, and meanwhile Simon is beset by ambitious mamas trying to set up their daughters with him. So they have conspired to form a partnership where jealous men will see Daphne as like a high status object because she's associated with Simon, who's a duke, and then the mamas will see that Simon is with Daphne. But as you know, if you've read or seen any material in which people have had a pretend courtship, sometimes there are real feelings.
Excellent.
Dearest gentle reader, it is often said that those who marry in haste must repent at leisure. A sentiment that is clearly shared by Miss Daphne Bridgerton, who has apparently rejected not one, not two, but 3 proposals already this week. Some believe she is showing admirable forethought in her deliberations, but I would venture a different conjecture, that she, like this author, is still waiting on the only suitor of note.
Here we are. Our plan has worked thus far, but we must continue our ruse until I found my match.
In the grand battle of the season, I am your trusted general, marshalling the troops.
Wellington could only hope for a soldier so brave.
And handsome. Must not forget that.
I know. I will say, like I said, this was group written, but one thing I can take credit for, it was a room of almost entirely women, and we're talking romance novels. The thirst was real, and I think at one point during a discussion, I sort of like shrieked out, "Simon eats ice cream and it's sexy." So that's my contribution to the discourse. And I think also like the thing that sometimes I wish that there was like a little annotated version that could pop up, because we actually did have 2 full-time researchers on staff. There is a lot of sort of historical grounding. Ice cream was brand new. And Gunter's is a real place where they go in the episode. And they were the first place to have ice cream. And so this was like a huge, like, sexy, exciting new thing that like the high society would go to try ice cream.
Oh, that's great. What I was going to ask you, was the stage direction eats ice cream sexily, or like what?
I believe it was, if I'm remembering correctly, and I might not be. Simon eats ice cream. It's hot. And we didn't know it was going to be British on page, which really takes it up a notch.
That's great. Well, I want to jump back to something you mentioned. You said that the writing room was mainly women and like female identifying folks, which is like, can you help us understand, like, in TV history, what a writer's room has traditionally been, and like some of the changes that are happening and why that's important?
Totally. So the writer's room is really largely an invention of the past, like 30, 40 years. Before that, it was a lot of sort of freelance scripts, and it's gradually evolved into what it is now. But historically, it's been a bunch of straight white men sitting around a table. There have always been female writers. There's always been successful female writers. There's always been, Black and Latinx and Asian writers and, LGBTQIA writers. But the sort of overwhelming majority was, for a long time, like, straight white dudes, probably went to Harvard. So that has been kind of what it is. And I think it's evolving rapidly, not rapidly enough, but I do think it's rapidly evolving. I was in one room where I was the only woman for the first 6 weeks, and that felt like an anomaly, which is great. That really felt like I was in a room full of dinosaurs. So I think now it's most rooms I've been hired for. Actually, the last 3, the First Wives Club was all women and 1 gay man. I was one of only 2 white writers. Everyone else was Black. Bridgerton was almost all women. The showrunner is a gay man. And then there was 1 straight man who was generally very, very good, very, very wonderful writer. And I think it was just like, what is this energy? This is fascinating. And then Special, which was the last season I worked on, was all women and gay men. So it's, and I think, rooms work a little differently when it's those groups. I think in general, they've been a little bit more efficient. And I think also, just a little more laid back. I mean, rooms, especially comedy rooms, can get very blue. They can get, it's a wild work environment. But I think more and more now you're finding more of an underlying sense of respect for everyone there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because I mean, you hear stories of, it's almost like this weird mythology and lore of like these really crass or immature writers' rooms.
Yes.
Like or whatever.
And I think there's a way to do that. Like, I think I've been in rooms that were dirty, where I felt very like safe and supported and comfortable. And then I've been in rooms that were not, where I've been like, I don't like it here. So it's really, I think, depends on how the environment is established and sort of what the intent of everything is. So I think it's changing. I don't think it's changing fast enough. I think there's still not enough, certainly racial diversity in rooms. I think there's, Special was amazing because we had 2 disabled writers in the room. I don't think you see enough diversity of abilities. But I do think it is changing.
That's great to hear and very encouraging because, we get reports about it, but like to have someone who's like in the room on the ground saying this is very encouraging. And
Yeah.
Shonda Rhimes and Shondaland has been a huge part of this changing landscape. And I've heard that in Shondaland, there is a great respect for the written word of the writers, and that like actors are encouraged not to ad lib, but really focus in and be word perfect. I'm wondering if you've heard that rumor, and also like, what do you think that means? Like, what does that signify in the industry?
I've heard it. I wasn't on set, so I can't totally speak to it, but I have heard it. I think Shonda really has an extreme reverence for the written word. And I think she's so deliberate and careful about how she speaks and how she writes that I think that sort of translates down. And it's funny because for me, I came from a comedy background where there's a lot more encouragement to let the actors sort of go at it and play and see what they can find that's funny. And like, one thing I learned at UCB was to not take it personally if I wrote something for Nicole Byer and she went off script, because A, what she's going to think of is probably funnier, and B, I put the structure there for that. Like, that's my contribution. And so it's just a different way of doing things, but I think they're both valuable. But I think in drama, it's probably more helpful to lean towards the word perfect end of things, especially with this where we're, in full Regency and dealing with some language changes and everything.
Sure. So when it comes to like generating these scripts, we had a great question from I believe it was Carol, class of 67, asking, what are your writing preferences? And I want to expand on that of like, so how do you come up with ideas? Where do you write them down? Do you type them? Do you have a notebook? Do you like to handwrite? What's your process of like recording your ideas? And when do you get your ideas? And how do you not forget them?
So I wish I had a foolproof way to be like, this is how I get my ideas. And I've had a few that have come to me really pretty fully formed. But more often, there's something like, I have a pilot that's in development right now that I won't say too much about because I don't think I'm allowed to, but for like a year before I wrote it, in my head, I had what I can only describe as a vibe, which is not an idea. Okay. And the vibe was like Gone Girl, but about motherhood. What does that mean? You can't sell that. And I tried everything to shake it loose. Like I reread Gone Girl, I read stuff like in that vein. I watched a bunch of pilots and nothing quite did it. And then one morning I woke up and I knew what it was. And I kind of had the whole story. And that's not helpful in a lot of ways, but it's just, I think what you have to do is be really disciplined about consistently working on ideas and consistently thinking about ideas. And a lot of the times those are just sort of seeds that you plant in your mind, and then eventually one will bloom without warning. In terms of how I keep track of them, I would say I have a file on my phone that I don't necessarily update that much. I think if it's an idea I really want to pursue, it will stay in my head. And that's kind of how I know what to write, is that something, a little germ like that Gone Girl but with motherhood thing will like get in my head. And as I'm walking, I'm just like, what is this? What is this? Or like, I watched a documentary the other day that sparked something for me. And I kind of like have just had it in my head since. In terms of smaller things like lines of dialogue or like scenes I want in that show, that I definitely write down on my phone. And as anyone here who's a writer or just a human probably knows, the most annoying and common thing is when you're like, this is an idea I will never forget, so I don't need to write it down. You will always forget that idea. I did it truly yesterday. I was re-breaking a story and I was like, oh, I got this. I don't need to write it down. I'll remember it. Don't know what it was. So But I usually believe the important stuff will stick with me mostly.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I want to make sure that we get some airtime to is like Bridgerton, obviously, cultural phenomenon and massively popular. Special is groundbreaking. Could you tell us a little bit about Special for those who might have not seen season 1?
Totally. So Special is a Netflix show. Season 2 will be out on May 20th. Season 1 came out in 2019. And it's written by it's created by and stars Ryan O'Connell, who's one of my dearest friends. We wrote on Awkward together. And it's sort of about very loosely based on his life as a gay man with cerebral palsy. And season 1 was actually Netflix's first short form show. So the episodes were 15 minutes. I didn't work on season 1, so I have no real dog in this, but please check it out. I think it's so wonderful. It is groundbreaking, and it deals with stuff we haven't seen on television before, but it's also just, Ryan writes characters so beautifully. He writes relationships so beautifully. There's so much heart, and it's also just really, really funny. And the cast is amazing. Ryan stars in it, but it's also Poonam Patel, who's an incredible comedic actress, Jessica Hatt, who's a legend. And season 2 is full length, so it's half-hour episodes. And because of that, we were really able to sort of flesh out all the characters, give everyone their own stories. We have some incredible guest stars, Charlie Barnett, Lauren Weedman, just like some really... Max Jenkins, just some really, really great people, Leslie Jordan, and I'm so, so proud of it. I think we're really telling stories that haven't been seen, and I think it's also just really fun, and I hope that people watch it and love it as much as we love making it, because it was truly one of the greatest experiences of my life.
So that's beautiful. And Kat, one of our viewers, Kat with K, is wondering like what are like studios interested in? And I think Special's a really interesting case. Is Special in its sort of radical inclusion, is that a changing trend, or is it an anomaly?
No, I think it's a changing trend, but it's interesting because Ryan, it's technically not really. It's the existing intellectual property was a book that Ryan wrote. And that was optioned in 2014 while we were on Awkward together. And then he took it around and got a lot of passes. And it seemed like a lot of the passes were like, is there an audience for this? Which is sort of code, it feels like, for too gay, too disabled, too narrow. Right. Which is crazy because I think it's at its heart so much about these universal shared experiences just through this lens of one specific person. But I think now there is a real desire for specific voices and voices we haven't seen before. And I think there's a desire for more representation. There's a desire for stories that feel different. And I really think and hope that we're going to see more of that, and we're going to see these new voices, making their way out. And I think that's not to say that if you're like a straight white dude, it's over for you. I think they're still having a time, but I think even within that, like, people want a story that they haven't heard before. They want to be surprised. And I think if I look at the shows I've enjoyed in the past few years, from like Fleabag to I May Destroy You to Pen 15, it's stuff that's felt very, very singular. And I think that's really where the appetite is right now.
Yeah. And it's so funny too, the prognosticators of like, oh, there's no audience for this. Like we're seeing here, Wendy, class of 96, loves Special, can't wait for season 2.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering, Leila, were there any shows when you were younger where you felt like you really were able to connect with? Were there characters or or just environments, worlds that were created on television that spoke to you?
You know what? This is a crazy answer. And it's actually one of the first things Ryan O'Connell from Special and I bonded over. There was a 2-season medium failed show on the WB, which is exactly how old I am, by the way, that the WB was a huge component of my adolescence, called Popular, that Ryan Murphy did. It was before Glee, before Nip Tuck, before any of that. And it was a high school show, but with this incredibly weird, camp Ryan Murphy sensibility. And like, it makes, I mean, I think Ryan Murphy shows can get a little off the rails, but like this, it makes Glee look like Dawson's Creek. Like there was an episode where all the popular girls were blonde and the brunette girls were unpopular, and they switched hair colors, and one of the popular girls just turned into Barbara Streisand when she had brown hair. There was an episode where all the women were locked in the bathroom together. It was just truly a wild, wild ride. But I think that felt like, oh, you can do something really interesting and really subversive and really your own unique voice. And I hadn't seen that before on television.
Oh, that's so cool. I had never heard about that show. What's the name of it again?
Popular. It's not streaming anywhere. But it is. I really loved it.
That's great. So, like, it's an amazing time to be a TV watcher.
Yes.
You know, peak TV and all that. Is that when all these streaming services became huge, were writers stressed about that or excited about that? How is peak TV landing in the writer community?
You know, I think there's good things and bad things.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the good end, there's a lot more jobs and there's a lot more places to sell things and there's a lot wider a net. So if you are someone whose voice is not like an ABC family comedy, there's room for you, which is wonderful. I think some of the sort of labor practices you're seeing being put into place because of that are not as wonderful. So, you know, there's a lot, traditionally the sort of economic path of being a TV writer was you worked on a network show and eventually you landed on something like, you know, if not Friends or Seinfeld, like something like, even like Suddenly Susan, something that would run for several seasons and then syndicate and you had your money. And now, you know, Bridgerton, I'm super grateful for it being this massive cultural phenomenon. I am not getting any extra money because of that. I don't get any residuals. I don't get anything. So that's a little bit of a challenge, and you have to kind of cobble together. You don't spend years on one show anymore. You spend 20 weeks on one show and then you sell a pilot and then you go do 20 weeks on another show. And I think there's things I like about that. Like I love the diversity of experiences. I've gotten to work with so many incredible people, but I also think there's a little bit of a cost in terms of just how writers are treated.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it seems like that sort of gig economy of the writing industry was probably really susceptible and vulnerable when the pandemic began.
Yes, it definitely was. I've been extremely fortunate to be working during this and having sold 2 pilots, but a lot of people have sort of been struggling. And it's something that, you know, the incredible thing about writing is it's a union job. And so our union, I think, is working to sort of like deal with these emerging issues. But yeah, it's been very hard for a lot of people during the pandemic. And I think things now are just starting to feel like soon they'll go back to normal. Not even right now, I think there's a bottleneck because so much got held up during the pandemic. So I think, you know, I have 2 projects right now that I'm waiting to take out to networks, and the prevailing thought seems to be like, let's wait a little longer. So I don't know. It's a wild world.
Do you think there are going to be a lot of TV shows about this past year? Like
No, absolutely
not.
No. I think the appetite is extremely not there. I think there's a real
Yeah.
No one wants to think about this again. So I actually had in one of my pilots, there was a little mention of COVID, and it was sort of part of the inciting incident of the pilot. And I called my producers when I finally got permission to write it, and I was like, we got to cut this. Like, if I was a TV executive, I'd throw this across the room if I read the word COVID. Like, I was like, I cannot engage with it any further. So I don't think we'll see much, and I think everyone is eager to leave behind. Maybe in like 50 years we'll see, a very po-faced limited series about this time. But like, I think right now most people are just like, let's never speak of this again.
Bring on the escapism. I
Yeah.
get to connect. Yeah. So I know that we have, quite a robust crowd with us tonight, and that I want friends to, we're now hitting that point of the evening where it would be really great if you have a lingering question, send that along, and I will be sure to raise it. And while people are sort of brainstorming or getting out whatever it has been, they've been, dying to ask, Leila, you are sort of a mentor to a lot of other writers in how you sort of give information about the industry, including a newsletter that you have. Could you tell us a little bit about this newsletter, what it is, and how people can sign up for it?
Yes. So I recently started a newsletter called Room Snacks, because the most important aspect of the writer's room we have not talked about here is that you're constantly snacking. There's a writer's room PA whose job is basically to keep bringing food. So there's like Trader Joe's peanut butter pretzels and so many LaCroix. It's great. So anyways, I wanted to start a newsletter about TV writing that was sort of geared towards the emerging writer, because I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of advice and a lot of things I've learned the hard way that I wanted to help someone learn the easy way. So about a month or two ago, I launched Room Snacks. It's a weekly newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday. It is, we cover everything from super granular discussions about like, how do you come up with an idea? What do you do when you think someone else has the same idea as you? Is that a problem? Not really. To the next series I'm going to do is about like really breaking down the process of how I write. So like, I have an idea. Okay, how does it get from there to a script? Because that's a multi-stage process. And then I do a monthly advice column. On Fridays, there's an open thread where people can talk amongst themselves and build a little bit of community. I think it's fun. People seem to like it. And it's been really fun for me to write. So if anyone's interested, you can go to roomsnacks.substack.com. It costs $50 a year, which is less than $1 an issue, which I think is a bargain. So yeah, I've been having a blast. And it's, I mentor people for free too. But this has been a way to just sort of blast things out to more people than I have time to sit down and talk with.
That's great. Why isn't it an issue if someone has the same idea as you? Without giving a newsletter.
No, totally. Because things get developed, most things don't get shot. So I tell a story where my first pilot that my agent was like, oh, we'll sell this. A similar pilot was announced in a trade publication. I was like, oh my God. And like, guess what? My pilot also sold. Neither of them got shot. So that's one thing. But two, the other thing is parallel development sort of happens all the time. We have, NBC premiered Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip and 30 Rock, which were both shows about basically SNL, the same season. The movies Friends with Benefits and No Strings Attached premiered within 6 months of each other. There are literally 9 Reddit GameStop movies in development.
For real.
So yeah, that's an actual fact. So it doesn't matter. And also every writer has a different take on something. So, if you and I sat down and we both had the same idea, we would probably write 2 very different scripts. So it doesn't matter. It's fine.
That's really
thank you guys.
So there's the URL, friends, if you want to subscribe to Lila's awesome newsletter. And $50 is such a deal.
Thank you. Or $5 a month, but that's less economically efficient. I shouldn't tell people that. It would make me more money. But I'm an East Coaster. I love a bargain.
That's great. And, and it might be a really good thing to share too if you know any current students at Westtown who are interested in developing the creative skills. These sorts of newsletters are really helpful because they touch on things that oftentimes are out of the institution. Leila has the industry smarts, and that is very valuable. I have some quick fire questions here, Leila. So, what are the television writers' favorite TV shows right now? Generally speaking, what are the writers talking about?
What are writers talking about? I mean, I haven't been in a room, so I don't know. I will tell you, the dirty secret of TV writers is that we don't watch that much TV because it gets to a point where you're like, oh, I see the writers room working, or I see these moves. I can kind of tell what's going to happen. Not a fictional show, an unscripted show, but everyone I know is really into the, is it called This Is a Robbery? It's the Netflix show about the Isabella Stewart Gardner heist.
Cool.
Series, but that's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
I am very behind on my TV watching because I went into a pandemic depression and all I could handle was Bravo reality shows. So that's where I was at. But I've just gotten back in. I am watching I'm finally watching I May Destroy You. I'm watching Fleabag. I finally started What We Do in the Shadows and just adore it. It's so fun. It's so silly. I really look forward to watching it every week tremendously. This is very dorky. I made myself a TV schedule like I'm a network. So every night I have my shows that I watch. Oh, and WandaVision. Everyone was talking about WandaVision, which is really right down the middle because it's about the history of TV. I mean, it's not. It's about Marvel, whatever. But it is using the form of sort of the history of television.
Awesome. Good recommendations. Question from Elizabeth, class of 87. Did author Julia Quinn have any input in the writing of the episodes?
No. She got the scripts and but she didn't have sign-off power, but she was really happy with them. She follows me on Instagram. She seems extremely lovely. I want her life very much. She lives in Maine and writes these books and seems like she has a wonderful life.
Yeah, can we do a series about that? That seems like some good escapism.
I know, right?
Question from Christine: which is harder, coming up with a new idea or story to pitch, or working on a series and having to constantly come up with ideas and storylines that keep it fresh?
That's a great question. They're both challenging in different ways. I think the series is hard because you don't have a template. So you're really figuring out what this thing is, and that's a lot of brain work. But I think also once you're on a show and once the show's up and running, figuring out where the story should go, figuring out what's interesting, and also figuring out sometimes, this is sort of granular, but you'll have an episode and you'll know, okay, this is what the lead is doing. This is what the secondary lead is doing. We need a story for the tertiary lead, but it needs to fit into the same time period. It needs to take this many scenes. It becomes a little bit of math, which is sort of interesting. And I think it's hard to writers' rooms get burnt out. I think actually one thing, to go back to an earlier question about peak TV that's been nice, is doing shorter seasons because you don't get as burnt out. But I think if you watch a network show and there's 22 episodes, episode 16 is usually around Christmas time, and it's not great. And it's because the room's tired. And I think everyone kind of knows that. So I think it's ultimately harder coming up with stuff once the series is in motion, but both are challenging.
That's very interesting. And especially watching episodes with the question of like, okay, what time of the year was this for the writers and what was going on in their lives?
Yes, I can always tell in a 22 episode series, I can always tell what they wrote at Christmas time because no one wants to be there. Everyone's just like, sure, okay.
Okay, here's another question for you. Is there a joke that you are really proud of that you wrote that somehow didn't make it, that like you think of all the time and that you're still like really proud of, but it like haunts you that it never got on?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer. There's one thing that I can't remember that got taken in and out of a special script so many times but I don't remember if it ended up on air, so I don't want to speak out of turn about it. But there are ones that like I just consistently feel in my heart.
Do you get Netflix for free?
No, you don't get any of the streaming services for free. You can write them off as a business expense, but I do think that that's rude and would like that to change.
This is a question from Josh, class of 86. Cliche question, but what writers or written works have been your inspirations? So yeah, like what are some that immediately come to mind?
I think this is also very cliche to say, but I think Nora Ephron's work for me is like such a touchstone. Both her scripts, like, I'm a human woman. I love like When Harry Met Sally and You've Got Mail and all that, but also her essays and her writing have really just her voice inspires me a lot. And I think also I think anything that feels voicey and female and a little harsh has always been inspiring to me. So I just read, like a year ago, I read The Dud Avocado by, I'm blanking the name, but it's a 60s book. And it's this American girl who's living in Italy and just like a complete mess. But it's so sharply observed and funny and mean. And I think that really always connects for me.
Huh. Okay.
I like a mildly unlikable protagonist.
Awesome. What's your favorite Bravo reality show?
Okay. Thank you so much for asking this question. Of all time, okay, wait, I have a lot of answers. I'm sorry. This is now another 3-hour conversation. An evening with Bravo fan Leila Cohan. So Real Housewives of New York is my ride or die. I love it so much. That's like the one I've been most consistent about. Vanderpump Rules has been rendered problematic out of existence, but I consistently say that if I, a scripted TV writer, could write a season that built as well as season 2 of Vanderpump Rules, I would die happy. The pacing on that is sensational. Huh. Yes, something is mentioned early in the season, it's dropped, and then it turns out to be the entire dramatic engine for the last few episodes. It's incredible. I also this season have just adored the Real Housewives of Atlanta. They had an iconic trip, the best trip that's ever happened on a Bravo show. I loved Salt Lake. And I don't know if it's pandemic or what, but like the absolute no statesness of Summer House has really been speaking to me. So those are,
wow.
I love Bravo reality television. Thank you, Andy Cohen.
That's awesome. We went in deep on that one. That was great.
I could have gone so much deeper.
All right. So last question, because I'm looking at the time here, and I want to thank everyone for their fantastic and engaged questions. Leila, so like from a television writer, how should we understand television in our culture? Sometimes TV gets a really bad rap. Some people say it's distracting or corrosive. What should we know when we watch a piece of television? What should we appreciate, and how can we understand television in 2021?
Well, I do think it's important to watch critically, and I think it's important to say, what is this show saying? What is this show reinforcing? like, is this bringing us something new, or is it bringing us sort of tired, like iffy messaging? I know for me and a lot of other people, after everything that happened last summer, it was tough to watch like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and other police shows. Like, I think that, and I know they totally rebuilt their season. I've heard it's great, but like, I think it is important to watch critically. But that is because I think TV is a mirror for us, and it shows who we are and sort of what we're thinking, because TV characters can speak in a way that we can't in real life. They can sort of, it's a little bit of our id, I think, in some ways. And so I think that it also then has the potential to show us worlds that aren't quite our own, and show us points of view that aren't our own, and give us tremendous empathy and just a broader worldview.
On that note, Leila, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. But we have one more thing.
Yes.
By gum, there's been a raffle. And as the guest of honor, would you be willing to announce our lucky winners tonight?
I certainly would. So the winners are Carol Savory Frederick, class of 67, and Bruce Reeves, class of 51. Congratulations.
Hey.
Enjoy your Netflix swag bag.
Yes. All right. Congrats, Carol. Congrats, Bruce. And Leila, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with Westtown.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be in the Westtown family.
You are officially in the Westtown family. We're going to be inviting to the reunion soon. Oh, yeah. You have your merch.
I do have my merch, so we're all getting swag, guys. It's great.
You have a moose head coming to you. It's texted.
Perfect. Oh, great. That's just what I wanted.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass it back to Dami to take it away and close out the evening.
Thank you, everyone. That was a great conversation. Leila, you did such an amazing job. And thank you to Alex, too, for being the hostess with the mostest. I do want to shout out Leila again, because we are wearing the same sweatshirt. So we both have on our Westtown swag. Again, thank you all for viewing with us this evening. We appreciate you all joining in with us. You will get a survey tomorrow with a link to the recording too, so stay tuned. And we have another event on May 29th, and it is an alum career panel. So stay tuned for information about that as well. Thank you again, and I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Leila. Have a good evening, everyone.